battery disconnect switch, and DC circuits. Today we're going to talk a little bit about my Grand Design Reflection 303 RLS. This is a 2022 model with a build date of November 2021. The battery disconnect switch is inside of this compartment up on the wall, and again I removed the screws out of there just for part of this video, but that is where the disconnect switch is located. And then the bus bar that I talk about is in the front compartment behind the battery, and there's a plastic cover over that, so I removed the cover for this video. So this is a diagram of this bus bar that's located in the front compartment right behind the battery. So let's kind of take this and walk through how it all applies to this. So on this 303, we have a couple of things that the older 303s might not have. One being a 12-volt refrigerator, and the other being the solar charger. So starting from the left, I'm going to use my little pointer here. So this circuit right here actually feeds the 12-volt refrigerator, and what it does, this is your 12-volt hot, feeds through this copper bus bar, through a circuit breaker, and then goes out to the refrigerator. So if you don't have a 12-volt refrigerator, you won't have these two terminals in this copper bus bar. This terminal right here, this wire comes directly from the battery, goes through a resettable circuit breaker, out, and this wire right here actually goes out to the battery disconnect switch. And I'll walk you through the battery disconnect switch in a little bit, but then I'm going to go all the way over to this side. This wire comes in from the battery disconnect switch. This wire goes out to your DC panel inside the camper. So effectively this terminal, this lug right here, is just connecting in or out from the battery disconnect switch and back to your panel. Then there's also a resettable circuit breaker right here, and this circuit goes up to the Schwintek slide in the bedroom. Alright, so let me jump back over to here and just kind of keep going down the row. This wire, so again, coming in from the battery, all of the copper is one continuous bus bar. So everything from this terminal over to here is all electrically connected directly to the positive side of the battery. So again, we're going from the positive side of the battery through the bus bar, through a resettable circuit breaker, and this goes out to your leveling jacks. This wire right here actually connects to the 12-volt supply coming from your tow vehicle. This wire here, this would be your cap lights. It also controls the lights inside of your compartments, because if you'll notice, they'll turn on even when the battery cutoff switch is disconnected. This wire right here goes out to your holding tank heaters. And again, so all of these are always connected directly to the 12-volt battery, and they are not switched by the battery disconnect switch. So let's talk a little bit about this circuit over here. Get my pointer in here a little bit. This wire comes from the solar charge controller, goes again through a resettable circuit breaker and out to the battery. So effectively your solar charging system is always connected to the battery. And then again, we talked about the one on the end here. So if you look at the bigger picture, we're going to come in from the battery through a resettable circuit breaker out to the battery disconnect switch, and then we're going to come in from the battery disconnect switch on this wire right here, and we're going to go back out on this wire right here to the DC panel. Let me just back up a little bit, kind of get a bigger picture. So that's the solar controller, and you can see that again is wired directly through the second to the right terminals and goes right straight to the battery. This is the battery disconnect switch in the 303 RLS. So if you'll notice, I took the screws out of it. I'll show you why in just a second. But when the battery disconnect switch is on, you cannot remove the little red plunger. When I turn it off, this comes out. So when it's locked in place, and you can actually see on the switch it says on and off. So when I put this plunger in there and I push it in and turn it to on, now my battery disconnect switch is turned on, which is allowing power to go from the battery through the switch and then eventually up to the panel inside the RV. So I'm going to turn this switch off and pull this out a little bit. So one of the things that gets a little bit confusing, and this is kind of be a little bit hard to see, is they change the color of the wire. So if you'll notice, the red wire, so coming from the bus bar in the front compartment of the trailer, that red wire feeds directly from the battery to this terminal over here. When the disconnect switch is turned on, power will flow through the switch, out through that black wire, back to that bus bar, to the terminal located on the right side, and then from there it'll go up to the panel inside the RV. The confusing thing about the battery disconnect switch for some people is that it doesn't disconnect all of the power going to your RV. So if you have a 12 volt refrigerator, that stays powered. Things like safety circuits, your leveling system, some of the lights. For instance, this light. I can turn this light on. When I disconnect and pull my plunger out, that light stays on. So some of the lights in the different storage areas are not connected to the battery disconnect switch. On the 303, the DC power panel is actually located in the cabinets right as you walk into the RV. So this panel over here is our AC panel, and then on the front I removed the door and pulled the panel out just to make it a little bit easier to see, but that would be our DC power panel. So inside the trailer is the DC power panel. You can see the various fuses that feed the different circuits. Pull this out, you'll notice these two black wires that are connected directly to the panel. One of these wires, and I'm not sure which is which, and it really doesn't matter, one of these wires runs directly from the panel to that bus bar in the front compartment that we looked at. The other wire runs directly to the converter charger. Both of these are connected electrically. So you can see, and of course it's upside down, but it says input from 12 volt source. So if I take my own meter, these two connections are directly connected together. So again, when we talk about the battery disconnect, it goes from the battery through the disconnect switch, back to that terminal on the right side of the bus bar in the very front compartment, runs back to our DC panel right here, and then out of our DC panel and back to our converter. One of the important things to note about the battery disconnect switch is, like I mentioned earlier, it does not disconnect all of the circuits. So for instance, my 12 volt Furrion refrigerator stays powered whether that battery disconnect switch is turned on or off. Things like the lights, anything that's coming from one of the fuses on this DC panel will be turned off when that battery disconnect switch is disconnected, if you're running from the battery. However, if you're running from the converter, so you're plugged into shore power, the converter will continue to supply power to that DC panel. And just like right now, I'm plugged into shore power, battery disconnect is turned off, and yet everything in the RV that's 12 volt or powered by 12 volt source actually will stay on. So again, we're running strictly from the converter at this point, not from the battery.